They say gold slips away fastest from those who never stop to understand it. I once knew a man who earned plenty, yet was always poor. Not poor in income, but poor in discipline. He spent not with his hands, but with his eyes. Every time he walked through the market, his coins leapt from his pouch, not by theft, not by taxes, but by desire, quiet, familiar, and deadly. He didn't need most of what he bought, but he saw others wearing fine robes, so he wanted one too. He smelled imported perfumes on another man's wife, and bought 3 bottles without knowing who he was impressing. He filled his table with meats he couldn't finish, and his walls with art he didn't understand. He believed gold was meant to flow, but gold, when misled, becomes a river that washes away your freedom. People admired his appearance. That was his reward. Strangers would nod, smile, and whisper he must be doing well, and for a while, that made him feel taller. But what he didn't see was the pit he was digging, 1 silver piece at a time. While others built safety with each saved coin, he built a tower of glass, bright to the eye, but hollow inside. One day I asked him, "How much do you keep?" He smiled and said, "Baruk, I earn enough not to worry about keeping." That answer told me everything. He thought income was the same as wealth. But income is wind. It comes and goes. Wealth is weight. It stays when you understand how to carry it. And he had never learned to lift even a single shekel with care. He wasn't a fool. He was simply untrained, like a horse that runs fast in the wrong direction. His problem wasn't greed. It was blindness. Blindness caused by craving. Craving caused by comparison. Comparison caused by fear. The fear that if he didn't look like others, he would lose respect. But gold does not care how you look. It only follows those who respect it first. One evening, I saw him arguing with a merchant over price, not because he couldn't afford the item, but because, for the first time, he noticed how little gold he had left. That night, he sat beside me by the well, silent. His fingers ran over the edge of his empty pouch. Again and again, I said nothing. Wisdom grows best in the soil of silence. After a while, he spoke. "I don't understand. I work harder than most. I make more than many. But I have nothing." I nodded. "Because you spend as if gold were your enemy." He looked at me, confused. "Enemy?" I smiled gently. "Yes, you treat it like a curse to be rid of, not a friend be cared for. The man who spends with his eyes," I continued, "will always be poor, because the eye is never satisfied. It wants what it sees, until it owns what it regrets. True wealth begins the day you stop obeying every desire that visits you in the marketplace." He stared at the ground, as if seeing the dust for the first time. Before he left, I gave him 1 coin. "Do not spend this," I said. "Just carry it for 7 days. Let it teach you who truly hold the power, you or your desire." He nodded and walked away. I never asked what he did after, but a month later, I saw him again. He was dressed simpler, walked slower, but there was gold in his pouch and peace in his eyes. He returned to me weeks later, not with fanfare, but with silence. There was a stillness in his steps, as if each one carried a new weight, awareness. He sat by the well again, where we first spoke. But this time, he didn't ask for answers. He listened, and so I told him a story, not about coins, but about seeds. When a man sows gold recklessly, he reaps dust. But when he plants it with wisdom, even 1 coin can grow into a tree. He nodded slowly. "I carried that coin you gave me. Every day I wanted to spend it. For food I didn't need, for things I wanted to show others. But I didn't. And something strange happened." He paused. "I began to see how often I obey my eyes, not my mind." I smiled. This was the beginning of his transformation, not the saving of a coin, but the breaking of a chain. He began to track every coin that came in and every coin that went out, not with shame, but with curiosity. And what he discovered humbled him. Half his gold vanished on things he couldn't even remember. Trinkets, tastes, trophies for no one. And the rest? Lost to pleasing people who were never paying attention. Desire, I told him, is a clever thief. It steals quietly and leaves you smiling. So he changed, slowly, not by cutting pleasure, but by naming it. He asked himself, is this a need or disguise? He stopped eating to impress, dressing to compete, gifting to be accepted. Instead, he kept gold aside for emergencies, for opportunities, for freedom. Gold that is not guarded, I reminded him, will always return to the winds that carried it to you. Soon, the merchants noticed. Not his clothes. They were plainer now, but his confidence. He no longer begged for discounts or overspent to show status. He bought with calm hands and clear eyes. One merchant whispered, he has less shine, but more power. That is the paradox of gold. It makes the wise invisible and the foolish loud. One day, he showed me a pouch with 10 coins. These I could spend, he said, but I won't. They are not for the market. They are for my future self. I leaned forward and looked him in the eye. Then today, you are wealthier than most men in this city. Because wealth is not the pouch. It is the patience to let it stay full. He began helping others, not with money, but with words. He taught young men in the square how to separate want from need. He shared his own shame openly, so others might wake sooner. Gold, he said, does not cure sadness, but it can protect peace if you let it stay. I watched him speak like a man who had once been blind and could now teach others to see. A year later, I invited him to my home, not because he was rich, but because he had become wise. He brought a gift, nothing expensive, a small wooden box carved by hand. Inside, 1 coin, the very coin I gave him. It belongs to your story now, he said. I placed it on my shelf, beside my oldest scroll. It was not just gold. It was proof that restraint is the first root of wealth. Many men, I told him, earn gold, but few ever keep it long enough to learn its name, and fewer still respect it enough to let it grow. He nodded, and in his nod, I saw something worth more than coins. Peace. The kind of peace that comes not from fortune, but from freedom from the hunger to impress. That night, as he walked away in the stars, I wrote a new line in my journal of truths. A man who learns to delay one desire can change the path of his entire life. And I knew then his story was just beginning. Months passed, and the man who once spent with his eyes began to build with his hands. Not palaces, but plans. He saved. He invested in learning. He walked through the markets not as a servant of desire, but as a student of value. And then, as it always happens, life tested him. His employer fell ill, and work dried up like a spring in summer. His income stopped. The city turned its back. But this time, he did not panic. Where once he would have borrowed, now he relied on what he had built. He opened a pouch with 30 gold pieces, enough to live humbly for many weeks. He looked at me and said, Baruk, I understand now. The gold I kept was never just for comfort. It was for moments like this. I nodded. True wealth is not seen in what a man buys, but in how long he can stand without selling himself. During those months, he watched others crumble. Neighbors who mocked his simplicity were now begging for coins they had once wasted on vanity. And he helped where he could, not with pride, but with clarity. I don't give to be admired, he told one man. I give because I know what it feels like to obey hunger instead of wisdom. Those words echoed like a bell in the market. Many began to listen, but one evening, temptation returned. A merchant offered him a rare jewel. Beautiful, rare, discounted just for him. You deserve this, the merchant said. And for a moment, the old voice inside him whispered the same. He held the jewel in his hand. It shimmered. It promised status, attention, applause. And in that moment, his hand trembled, not from desire, but from memory. He closed his fist around the jewel and then opened it. No, he said gently, not today, not for this. The merchant was shocked. But you have the gold. Yes, he replied, and I will keep it. He walked away not in pride, but in peace. He had won a battle invisible to most, a battle far harder than poverty. The test of desire when you finally have the means. Later that night, he returned to the well where we always met. He sat down beside me, quiet as usual. That jewel, he said, used to be my master. Today it bowed to me. I said nothing, just smiled. Sometimes The best thing a teacher can do is recognize when a student becomes a master. And in his silence, I heard the echo of victory. He began to teach more openly, creating a circle where young men and women came to hear his story. Not to copy him, but to awaken. He taught them how to read prices not with the eyes, but with intention. Ask yourself, he told them, is this for your soul or for someone else's eyes? It was wisdom passed like bread, quiet, simple, and nourishing. Soon, people in the market no longer pointed at his clothes, but at his calm. He became known not for what he bought, but for what he didn't. In a world drunk on appearance, he was sober with purpose, and in that, others found courage. One young man told him, "You made saving feel noble, like choosing strength over shine." He smiled. "It is," he replied. "Shine fades. Strength stays." When the rains returned and work resumed, he was ready. Not desperate, but deliberate. He had learned the lesson most never do, that desire is a storm, but gold is a seed. If planted with patience, it grows quietly, and if protected from the winds of want, it multiplies. And so, with steady hands and wiser eyes, he began again, not as the man he was, but as the man he had become. And I, Baruk, watched in the same fig tree where I had first seen him spend without thought. But now, I saw him walk past 10 temptations and choose none. Not because he couldn't, but because he knew the cost. And that, I tell you, is the mark of a man who is no longer ruled by his eyes, but guided by his mind. Years later, the city forgot his old self. The man who once spent with his eyes had become something else. Quiet, grounded, respected. But I remember the fear in his voice, the trembling hand holding a single coin. Now, others came to him for guidance. He no longer chased wealth. It followed him gently, like a shadow of his discipline. He had become rich in a way most men only dream of, by choice, not chance. He once told me, "Baruk, I used to think gold was a goal, but now I see it was only the mirror. The real treasure was the man I had to become to keep it." I wrote those words down and placed them among my oldest scrolls, because they held truth. Gold left alone teaches nothing, but gold resisted teaches everything. Resisting desire is not deprivation. It is dominion. One evening, I asked him, "Do you miss the things you used to buy?" He chuckled. "No, I don't even remember most of them." He paused. "But I remember the first day I said no and meant it. That memory feeds me more than any feast I ever paid for. That, I thought, is a man who owns more than coin. He owns clarity. As his wisdom grew, so did his influence. Not with fame, but with legacy. A merchant came to him, desperate, drowning in debt. He didn't lecture. He didn't judge. He told him the same thing I once told him. Carry one coin. Keep it. Learn what it feels like to say no when everything says yes. The merchant wept. That coin became his turning point, too. The man built nothing extravagant. He never returned to gold-lined robes or banquet halls. But his home was full of peace, of plans, of time. He hosted meals with friends who didn't care what he wore, only what he said. He laughed more, slept deeper, and every time he saved a coin, he smiled, not for the gold, but for the self-control it reflected. One day, he brought me a new scroll. "Baruk," he said, "I've written everything I've learned." It was a simple text filled with small truths. Spend like your future self is watching. Save like your children will need it. Say no to desire once, and it becomes easier each time. I copied his scroll 10 times and gave them to 10 students who were just like he once was. And when people asked me, "Who is he, this quiet man who walks like a king but dresses like a servant?" I answered, "He is wealth in its truest form. Invisible, intentional, free. Because wealth is not loud. It does not beg to be seen. It shows itself in choices, in peace, in power over temptation. That is the wealth no one counts, but everyone feels." In his final years, he lived simply, surrounded by those he once inspired. They called him a master, but he always smiled and said, "No, I was just someone who stopped buying what I didn't need, so I could live how I truly wanted. And in that humility, he left a mark on the city no jewel could match. His story, passed from mouth to mouth, changed men more than any merchant's gold. I, Baruk, have told many stories, but this one I tell with pride, not because it is rare, but because it can be yours. Every time you hold a coin, you hold a decision to buy what fades or to build what lasts. The man who spent with his eyes once lost everything, but the man who learned to see with wisdom, he gained something far greater, the power to keep what truly matters. So now I ask you, what do you see when you look at your gold?